Read Talk is supported by Read Design. With the power of machine learning, Read Design derives patterns and trends that accurately predict the characteristics of finished reads. Founded by Logan Asterling, Read Design makes quality reads with characteristics you can count on. Save valuable time and get back to what you love, making music. Visit readdesign.io to learn more. Welcome to Read Talk. I'm Margaret Marco.
And I'm Courtney Miller. Joining us today to share his read-making insight and expertise is Nick Stovall, Principal Oboe of the National Symphony Orchestra. He also teaches at the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins University and with the National Symphony Youth Fellowship Program. Welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you how you keep a full read case with your busy performance schedule as principal oboist, chamber musician, and soloist.
Sure, that seems like it's a burning question, top of mind for a lot of people, not just me, but I think all of us would like to keep a nice full read box all of the time. For me, it's a matter of working all of the time in different stages. So, sort of having an assembly line going. You probably have heard that from a lot of people. I tend to work best if I make reads over a day or so, not going straight from a gouged piece of cane to something that I can play in the instrument. So if I make a blank and then I scrape that blank the next day and then maybe finish it the following day, things tend to work out better for me. So if I've got things going all at those different stages, then I'm usually assured something that's going to work.
Do you have multiple read cases or one big read case? How do you kind of keep them sorted?
Yeah, I do have a few, but it's especially if I'm gearing up towards a specific project, a concerto or a chamber music recital or a recording or something like that, then maybe I'll put a few to the side. But for the large majority of the time, I think I just keep them all together. One part of my approach is that I take copious notes and I number all of the reads. So it helps me keep things straight, especially if I'm trying something new. If I've changed a gouger or if I'm trying a new piece of equipment. I take notes on basically everything that goes into the read. Where did I get the cane? What sort is it? Where did I get it from? Did somebody give it to me? What diameter? I've gotten into recently, and this is maybe getting into too much minutia directly, but I've started getting very much into testing hardness and actually density as well.
Very interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah, we actually do want to explore that and the specific tools that you use to do that, because that's an interesting variable.
Well, we all have so much time on our hands now, and I think we're finding different ways to use that time.
Yes.
For me, I've used a hardness tester for maybe 2 years or something like that, and I've got the Reads and Stuff one. It's the digital one, so rather than having an analog readout, it gives me a little number on a screen. Mm-hmm. And I guess there are pros and cons to both. With an analog, you can sort of see the difference. You can see where the needle moves ever so slightly between the numbers, whereas the digital one, it just kind of gives you what you get. But I found that interesting. It's most instructive for a piece of cane that's already gouged. If I do it earlier than that, it gives me slightly strange readings in terms of what I feel like is going to be usable. And then with the density, that's a much more recent development. And I actually made my own little density tester. You couldn't really make a hardness tester, obviously, because you need the little plunger that makes the indentation in the cane. So that's a pretty specific piece of equipment. But with the density tester, it's just a scale that can go down to 2 significant digits. And then I made a little stand. And so that's been more of a little, project while we're not playing concerts.
Oh, so density equals weight. If the cane is heavier, you have determined that it's denser.
Well, I'm using density maybe slightly loosely. I guess what I should say more, what I'm measuring is, you could say, porosity, or it's relative to water. So density being mass divided by volume, I measure the weight of the cane. I put it onto my little stand, and I record that. And then I've got a pan of water that sits just above this scale, so it doesn't actually touch. And then I've got a little plunger that goes into the water that has something to hold the cane. And then I put the piece of cane underneath of that. So then I record the measurement, basically the displacement of the water that the cane gives me there. And so then I divide the first number, I divide that over the sum of the two. So I add the second number to the first, and then I take division, and then that gives me a number that is a relative density, relative to the water.
That's fascinating. We need pictures. And
I was just thinking that would be the next request, because that would be very, very useful to visualize.
Well, so the thing that I have is very rudimentary. I mean, I got a piece of this is almost embarrassing, but I got a piece of plexiglass from the hardware store, and I heated it up at two places, and I made basically two right angles to make the stand, and then it's very homemade looking. You can find one of these things on Reed supplier websites that sell such a thing for quite a huge sum of money, but I decided to go the homemade route.
How cool.
That's awesome. I remember that about you, Nick, is that you're not only a brilliant artist, but you're extremely intelligent about experimentation and mechanical issues as well.
Well, that's flattering, but I find that stuff really fun.
Have you found that certain types of cane are denser generally than others?
Well, I don't know if I can say that. This experiment is still pretty new. But what I can say, and what makes me feel assured in this, is that hard cane is generally denser than soft cane. So generally speaking, if I find something that measures with a low number, meaning a harder on the hardness tester, then it's generally also dense. And so the two things at least are matching up. Right.
Well, I'd like to go back and just dovetail a little bit with something you alluded to when you were talking about how you organize your reed making process. How many reeds do you like to have ready for big performances, like a recording or like a Tambo de Couperin performance?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can never have too many, I suppose.
That's one truism. Yes.
But I would feel comfortable if I had 3 or 4 that I felt like I could do the task with. That feels like a safe number to me, because usually there's something goes wrong, and maybe a reed will crack, or it gives out before the end of the series is up. Maybe it serves you well for one performance or something. So I would say if I have 3 or 4 in good working order, then I'm pretty happy.
Sounds good.
So, apart from experimenting with density and of cane, what else are you doing for inspiration and motivation during the pandemic?
Well, I have to say that my students are really what's keeping me inspired and motivated and interested. I'm sure I'm not alone in craving community and craving, connection to other people. And while we're all, sequestered in our homes and not able to play music together, it's been extremely gratifying to keep the connection with my students and to hear them progressing, to hopefully be helping them as they do that. And really, that is the thing that makes me feel like I'm still contributing something.
And I imagine you still demonstrate for them. I find that I have to stay on my toes.
Yes.
When teaching.
Yes, I have to, a friend of mine said, well, so are you taking this period of time and you just don't have to make reeds anymore? And I said, well, actually, I don't. Well, part of it is that I kind of enjoy it.
Right.
And it's interesting in and of itself. But then also, if I'm going to be playing in a student's lesson, I want to make sure that it's something that I endorse.
Right.
Yeah. So, who are some of your reed-making mentors?
Right. I feel like I have had a lot of useful, helpful, generous people in my life where that's been concerned. I would say John Mack. He was my teacher. He was our teacher. Courtney, you and I were in school at the same time.
Yes.
And So at that point in my life, I was kind of getting my bearings as far as what the reed needs to do, how to play the oboe even, really. I mean, so he was an amazing source of knowledge and inspiration, really, at that point. I would say, and I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, Courtney, about this, and also I guess because you had spent your undergrad years with Eric Olson in Florida before that, but that for me, Mac was kind of a big picture, kind of big ideas kind of person. He didn't offer a lot in the way, he didn't have written handouts. He didn't say, make
Correct.
it this long.
Yes.
He was more, and I don't know if this is because it was, towards the end of his life when he wasn't playing in orchestra as much, but I have a sense that, as amazing as he wasn't a terribly careful man. He,
right.
He did a lot of things by instinct and by feel, and he knew how it was supposed to sound. He knew how it was supposed to work, and he went more from that. So in terms of offering a methodical, laid out formula, that wasn't really what I felt like I got from him. It was a lot more musically oriented. He said, the reed needs to be able to do this and that and the other, but he didn't say, this is how you get there.
I completely concur with that, Nick. I mean, he would work on our reeds he'd work on my reeds a little bit each lesson. He'd get it to vibrate more, of course. And then we'd play music, and that would be kind of it.
Right, yeah. He was always more interested in talking about musical principles and big picture thoughts. That was my impression.
And then that guided your reed making.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I think it wasn't until I got into my master's degree that I started to do things a little bit more methodically. I mean, the teachers that I was working with in those years, after I had left Cleveland, I studied in New York with Elaine Duvos and Nathan Hughes. And it was useful because they were offering information that was complementary but not identical to each other, but also because they had come from a similar background, having both of them worked with Mac in their formative years. But they were both, I think necessarily because of the rigors of their jobs, they were very methodical. They were much more oriented towards laying out formulas and make it this long, make it this thick and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I think that to a very large extent, any player's reeds are the qualities of them are determined by the requirements of their job. That sounds probably pretty obvious to say, but I don't think it can be overstated.
Mm-hmm, sure.
So what I mean to say is that the requirements of playing in the Met Opera Orchestra dictate a certain level of refinement, I think, from the reeds, both in terms of sensitive soft playing, reliable attacks, but also pitch placement. Those operas can go on for 5-6 hours, and in order not to get tired, I think those players, and I think probably John Varilla would concur, maybe, and Eugene Eisenthal, any of those fine players that have played in the Met Opera Orchestra, that there's a level of refinement that is dictated by the job that naturally goes into the reed making. And I think that the students that have worked with all of those fine players and teachers have benefited from that, But I think the day-to-day rigor of playing in the opera orchestra dictated a certain standard, a certain, output that those teachers had, that they do have, that then benefited us as students there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, just to backtrack a little bit, do you have any thoughts on breaking in reeds? And if so, what does that process look like?
Yeah, I forget who said this. It might even have been Mac, but he says, I don't believe in breaking in reeds. I believe in breaking down reeds.
Oh, that's excellent. That's true. That's kind of what we're doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, breaking down that cane.
Yeah, a little bit, I'd say that as it pertains to me, what that looks like is getting the reed to the point where I understand what it does, what it is, and what it isn't, and then I feel comfortable enough to use it to play my scales and arpeggios and all that sort of thing. So rather than starting from something that maybe said another way, I don't want to do battle. I'm willing to I'm willing to exert myself a bit on a read if it shows promise, if it's a particularly hard piece of cane or something like that.